Hello, my name is Ilona, and in this book I want to talk about a hypnotist's journey to Atlantis from Sarah Breskman Cosme. I hope I pronounced that last name correctly. Very interesting book, I have to say. I was reading it and then putting it aside because there was so much going on. It does affect, at least it affected me in a way. And that's also what's written in the book, that this will bring in, this will trigger things, but also heal things. It could explain certain things. So if you do feel like an affinity with this book, then I truly recommend it, because it does, it like brings movement to things. All right, I want to keep it as compact as possible, because there are multiple people that will have a hypnosis, because she's using the hypnotic techniques from Dolores Cannon to take someone to a former life in another planet or in Atlantis. And she talks to a lot of people, even herself. She even goes under hypnosis, and it's very interesting. Because I'm going to talk about a woman named Jen in this book, and she is really the thread that holds it all together, and we're kind of following her life in Lemuria, or Amun as it's called, and in Atlantis. Also, she will end up in Atlantis for at least 60 years, and it's very interesting to see. I will talk about some other things as well from other lives, but I will follow her life. And there's also connection with, in that lifetime, with the writer of this book, with Sarah. So she was apparently also in that lifetime. And, well, ultimately, that's very, fitting, because everything kind of connects. And we do have a tendency of meeting people multiple times throughout the lives that we lead, and that we have similar things and a similar way of looking at things, or maybe heal things. I just thought that was very interesting. So the first life I wanted to talk about, that this woman Jen talks about, is that she was a commander of a spaceship and she crashes on Earth. And in that lifetime as that man, she doesn't understand that they were just going to get some things from the planet, and where they come from, the race. Apparently they're very tall, they have blonde hair, they sound very Nordic in a way. But it's not named which planet they're from. But they were watching Earth, and they were trying to speed up the evolution. So they were sent out there with they thought they were just going to get some things, from the soil and life, and just watch certain things. But ultimately, the people that sent them there wanted them to crash. And this apparently happened with multiple races sent from other planets to crash there and to cultivate things. It's really to put things in motion. But as the man there, as the commander, he doesn't know that. So he doesn't understand that. And later on, Jen, if she's under hypnosis, you can kind of see from a bigger perspective. She understands that that actually was the intention. Well, she's there. She survived with a total of 7 from her spaceship. But that spaceship, of course, that landed in the water. So they lost all the technology, the red crystals. And he is kind of like, well, I'm stuck here. I guess I should, try to create, life with the beings that are already here. And so he picks a female mate. But it doesn't go very well, because, of course, they're very, very different, and a very different approach to things. And she does get pregnant 4 times, and the baby doesn't survive. And then she gets pregnant again, but then she leaves because she's had enough with everything. And he's very sad. He kind of feels like he's failed and losing his mind, and he dies that way. So it's very sad. Later on, she can actually look at it as Jen in the hypnotic state. She can look from a bigger perspective, and then she sees that the child that she carried actually lived, and that she had a lot of other children, and that was the start of civilization. So he was actually doing what he was supposed to do, and that also brings a form of healing for Jen, to see that his life wasn't for nothing, and he didn't fail at what he was supposed to do. So this was interesting to read. And then the other life that is interesting to know. Although I probably should mention this as well. In the crash, there were 7 survivors. So he was the commander of the spaceship and ultimately created, part of the new civilization, the hybrids. There was one other man aboard his ship that was completely like, I'm not going to be here. I want the technology. So he actually managed to get into the spaceship again under the water and got his red crystals. The red crystals are going to be very important throughout the entire book. And he used those red crystals to create like a schism, like a vortex, and he jumps through it and leaves the others behind. And he ends up in apparently Atlantis, or part of Atlantis, and he starts creating, I think, the last part of Atlantis. And he's very power hungry. He's completely focused and manipulating people there, and using all the technology that he has. And he's very focused on himself. So that is apparently the start of Atlantis in, I think, the last period. So that could be, of course, interesting later on. And I believe that the hybrid children would be part of Lemuria, if I'm not mistaken. So they both had a very significant role in that life. Well, we're now going to another life, and that is when she grows up on Lemuria. She is the princess there. She is going to follow her mother as the leader of the people there. It's very female oriented. So her mother was the leader before that, and before that her grandmother. She is they are very focused on emotions. They have crystals there as well, the red crystals. They have contact with them through their emotion, like an emotional contact. And they think they're talking to their ancestors, but they are actually talking to the seeders, from another planet. And they get answers from that, and they're very in tune with nature, in harmony. And it's very, there aren't really a lot of men around. That is very interesting. So she doesn't have a father, and she also gets a daughter in that lifetime. And the daughter is kind of like an experiment from different seeds from men. So they don't even know who the father is. Interesting, but that's what they explain. That's what she explains then in that life, how that actually is functioning that way. So there are men, but they are gathered in like a brotherhood there. It's like I said, it's more female focused, but there's no talk about fathers or anything. So she doesn't have a father, her daughter doesn't have a father, her mother doesn't have a father, and on we go. I thought it was just very, very interesting. There's also a legend about 2 sisters that will be united again to work together. So apparently there was a queen who had 2 daughters, and to protect one of her daughters, because there was some life-threatening happening, she pushed her through a vortex, and the daughter ended up somewhere else. And this legend is actually later being used by the people from Atlantis that will come to Lemuria or Amun. And let's see. I think, yes, I can already talk about that. They're coming there. They're very long people with blonde hair, gray suits. And they approach, of course, her mother, and her grandmother is there, and she is, of course, there. But she doesn't trust them at all. She's like, there's something very wrong about them. But her mother and grandmother see nothing wrong. And they come for help. They've got something that's going around, some disease that is going around in Atlantis, and they want their help from the red crystals. And apparently, a mother doesn't want to help them or give them like the red crystals, and they end up ending her mother. So they use a weapon on her mother, which is shocking in itself. So suddenly she's being crowned, and she's now the leader because, of course, her mother is not there anymore. And then they come to her to ask again for the red crystals, and she refuses, of course, to do that. But she has this feeling, oh, we're very strong, we don't have to worry about that. And then the Atlanteans use technology to completely wipe out everyone, except for her. They purposely keep her alive, and they make her watch the destruction of everything and the death of her daughter, her grandmother. They purposely try to traumatize her, to break her, to get that information about the red crystals. And they take her with them as their prisoner. It's really very shocking if you think about that. let's see. Just keep that a little bit, like I said, compact. And so now we are going to focus on Atlantis. And Atlantis is beautiful, but it's very gray. And there's a lot of smog going on. And later on it turned out, because apparently at the end of her life the smog is cleared, that it's there because of all the people that have died because of what is being going on there, going around there, the disease. And so they kind of just burned their bodies, and that led to the smog. And it's also been mentioned in other, sessions that she has with other people talking about this smog, and they don't really know where it's coming from, but apparently that's where it's coming from. So they had disease going on around there, and apparently a lot of people were affected by that. And that's why they went over to Lemuria for those red crystals, because they were very protected. They didn't get sick at all in Lemuria because they were connected to the red crystals. And they were more in balance in that way. Another thing about Atlantis is they have this class system. So if you are, of course, the elite, you are the, you've got the best seats in the house. The ring underneath that is like more of the middle class, and then of course you've got the third ring, and people that they're slaves, they don't have any rights, nothing. And Atlantis is very focused on technology. They're very emotionless, they're very scientific, so it's only science, ratio, things doing. They do a lot of experiments, and because of those experiments this disease started. It actually escaped from a lab. Sounds familiar? Probably. And so they put people in their houses, confine them, things like that, and then of course they ultimately come with a sting. Yes, that sounds very familiar. And that sting kind of works, but then later on those people and the children that got the sting actually give birth, and then they have all these deformities, the children. So they're kind of mixed with animal DNA, and you get the animal people, as she calls them. And they can look like cats, they can have gills, they can, all these things happening. And sometimes they also experiment just with people and animals, and you've got all these creations that are happening here. So they're trying to fix that, of course, but this is very interesting. Now we're going to a life that is from the writer herself. So she also, of course, attended her own hypnosis. She also participated in that. That's also part of her education, if I'm mistaken. And turns out she was actually in there as well. At the time that the other woman was prisoner, she actually met her when she was a child. She tried to get away. She tried to get out of her imprisonment, and that's how they connected. So she had seen her before when she was a child, and then later on she becomes a judge. She's a man in that lifetime. She becomes a judge, and she takes care of these cases with the animal people, because some of the animal people, because they can't really be brought back to society. They have different lifestyles, different way of handling things, and it's getting completely out of hand. So the government asked these judge and 2 other judges, so there are 3 in total, which of these people can be integrated and which of these people have to be sent to an island so they can live there by, themselves. Will take care of them there, but they can't be in society. So the judge does that for a long time. And then he decides, and the other 2 judges, well, we want to see and visit that island. We've been sending there so many people, so we want to see what's going on. So they go there, and very difficult to get there. And then when they get there, there's nobody. They've all been disintegrated. So they were never taken care of, which is very shocking for the judge. And then they try to come back, they try to change things. And he does get the leader to accept that no one's going to be sent there, but they all get retirement because the government doesn't really want to deal with them. So they're kind of pushed in retirement, but he still has a certain, control or a certain influence. And then later on, let's just kind of follow the line here. She's kind of been there for 60 years, and apparently the old leader that put her there dies. So it's a new government coming in, and they get her out of her cell, like, who are you and what are you doing here? They weren't completely sure about that. And of course, later on, they found out, of course, her connection to the red crystals. But she again gets experimented, because I want to mention there, when they take her as prisoner, they do awful things with her to get her to break. I mean, awful things. But she never breaks. But she also can't leave, because she has to, this feeling is that she has to transfer some of her knowledge. That's part of what they do in that line of, the line that she's in. They also, the people that when she was growing up, you kind of have to share your knowledge. So she can't leave. She can't just step out of it. And so she gets experimented on, and it gets completely out of hand. And apparently it's been broadcasted on the news there, and the judge sees her. So the judge is like, I've seen her before, and he managed with his influence to get access to her and to take over her case. He makes sure that she gets an apartment, so she's not in a cell anymore, and she gets someone to cater her, to help her, and it's a young girl that is not connected to the people from Atlantis. She's also there just to work, and she doesn't really like the people from Atlantis, and she actually transfers some of her knowledge to the girl, to really give some of her knowledge to continue. Then apparently the child, the young girl gets, imprisoned as well. And she's like, and the judge has already died. So she doesn't have that much leverage in a way anymore. So she decides, all right, I'm going to tell them, the red crystals, how to use them if they let the girl go. So they let the girl go, and telepathically she messaged the girl, go to the mountain, keep walking till you see snow, and then you can stop. So she kind of gives that telepathically the message to the girl, and the girl does that. And apparently in the snow there's like this entrance that she doesn't see. She falls into it, and there's a vortex there from way before the time, and she actually gets transported to another part of the earth and starts, sharing her knowledge. So she knows that the girls in a way is safe, and she's left with of course the new leaders, so-called, though they haven't changed at all. She knows that, and so she picks up the red crystal, and she actually uses the crystals to destroy Atlantis. So what they've done to her place, she actually does that now to Atlantis, and she feels this is what I'm supposed to do, because this experiment has to end. It's completely out of control. And the reset, in so to speak. So that is what happens, and of course then she can look back, and that was what needed to happen. And she needed a lot of time to recover from that. There was a lot of trauma, a lot of anger, a lot of course, destruction that she, experienced, her destruction of her own place, her own family, her own daughter, and then of course in Atlantis and living there in that conditions and the things that happened to her. So she needed a lot of recovering. So this is kind of like the thread through the entire book. And of course there are more stories from people that kind of connect with that. So I'd like to talk about really the lessons. That's very important for Atlantis. It was so focused on that more toxic masculine side. It was only focused on science, scientific way of living, the ratio, there was no emotions, there was no love for life or understanding that was part of it. They experimented on the animal people. They later on started to use those animal people for their life force. So other people in Atlantis, the richer part, could remain young. I'm sure that sounds very familiar as well. And the entire connection to what's going on there are a lot of people are now being reincarnated and remembering that the traumas they experienced, also maybe part of being an animal people there. There are people now being reincarnated, have an affinity with animals, which is very strong. And the animal people also had a different insight than the people from Atlantis, and that's why they wanted to use those animal people. So they are very strong with crystals, with golds, with metals, to use them in all kinds of ways. So they needed to learn from the Atlantis period is to balance things, to balance the feminine side. They needed that, and that wasn't there. It was just so focused and completely out of control with all these experiments that were going on, and the lack of respect for life. And so the traumas are still being triggered now. That's why this book is also very important if you do have an affinity with this, to read about that, because it also brings things, emotion. Sometimes you have that with a book, that it's not just about a text, it's also about the energy behind this. And I do believe that this book, there's a lot of energy behind it. So see if you're interested in that. And of course, we're going to watch it. What was the lessons of Lemuria or Amun? Lemuria, Lemuria. Well, they also write it with a Y. It was very feminine based. Of course, there was a balance, but they were kind of apathetic in surrendering. Just like the mother and grandmother couldn't imagine, they was very naive that people could be bad or evil. It was just like not even considered. They were not standing up for themselves. There wasn't really that masculine side that needs to be balanced with the female side. It was just really just focused on the female side. You can be receptive, but if you're only receptive, you're missing out the strength to stand up for yourself. And a lot of people from that time, with also the traumas of losing and the waves of water and the destruction that is going on, are now being reincarnated, and a lot of them are very idealistic, and they have they can't see the bigger picture. That are kind of focused on smaller things, and they have a lot of problems standing up for themselves, really standing up for themselves. And I do believe a lot of people that are very sensitive have sometimes issues, drawing their borders, setting up a border for themselves. So there could be a connection there as well. And ultimately, we are light, and it's all a game. It's about experiences. That's what life is about. And it's really the bigger picture. Everyone plays their roles. Also, the dark energies play their role. Very interesting to read, but it's also about certain experiments that I have a feeling like, well, we're in the same time. There are a lot of parallels to that time. And we are now already making another choice. And I thought that was very important in the book that she wrote about that there are people that are connected more to their emotions and their feelings. And it's not just science and technological way of thinking. Sorry about that. And it's especially, of course, with the dark energies. I do believe a lot of them have already been cleared, but their agenda is transhumanism. And that is, of course, the ultimate technology fused with humans, full control over humanity. And it's very fitting with these experiments in Atlantis and that cold, calculated way of looking at things, looking at life, seeing life as disposable. And I think that's traumas that are being triggered now, especially what happened the past 4 years. People are being triggered, and it's about healing, and we are already making a different choice, but we still have to make a choice. We always have a choice what we want to focus on. But it's about balance. It's about those two sisters in my eyes, those two civilizations in a way, the masculinity and the feminine, that it may be balanced and put together. And I think that is the main, basic, most important lesson from this book. It's about balancing things in ourselves, and in that way we are balancing everything around us, because we are connected, or people can, tune into that balance and decide for themselves if they want that or not. So I'm going to leave it at this. Hope to see you in another video. Bye.